Hi, everybody. I'm Olivia Scott, the creator of Freedom at the Mat. And today you are in for a treat. We're going to talk about healing and, in particular, alternative forms of healing. You know, I am grateful that whenever I travel, I make it my business to find a yoga studio to practice in. When I was in Chicago in August of 25 for the Black Women's Expo, I was grateful to have found the Haji Healing Salon in Bronzeville on the shy South Side. Once I stepped inside, it felt magical, and I had to know who the woman was who was behind such magic. Her name is Aya Nikole Cook. Her store and it's not just a store, it's a salon, had so many magical tools and resources for people who are seeking wellness. So I had to ask, where am I? What is this? I learned that her store is a healing salon because it does just that. It offers a variety of modalities, yoga, teas, books, and more. And today she's here to tell us what it's all about. Welcome, if you will, Aya Nikole Cook. Aya,
Hey,
how are you today?
hello, Olivia. I'm doing fantastically well. Thank you for that
Oh,
beautiful introduction.
well, like I said, I walked in and I was like, this is just absolutely magical. I've been to apothecaries before and I've been to places that, promote healing, whether it's the incense shop or the oil shop, but it was something very magical you had. So thank you for making time to talk to us today. And we're going to talk with you about the lesser known spiritual and wellness practices that you are very astute in and been practicing. So, Aya, can we start with the intentionality of naming your wellness center? Haji, the definition that you have is a spiritual pilgrim or person on a spiritual quest or journey. Healing, the continual act of remembering the truth of who you are and living in accordance with that truth. And salon, a culturally inspired space curated especially for practices related to the expansion and healing of a community that exists within. So please, oh wise one, Aya, tell us what inspired you to create the Haji Healing Salon and also to plant it in the south side of Chicago in Bronzeville.
The short of it is illness really brought me to a healing path, and on a deeper level. But I will say that I was born into a Buddhist family, which I think gave me a very early awareness of my myself as a spiritual person. And it really was the first seed that was planted for the life that I'm living now, essentially. So it feels like I was born into, just this, I don't know, this knowing that,
Mm,
that my life had to have a purpose and a mission. And I knew that it was kind of my job to figure out what that was. And so, I was living and doing what I thought was on mission to do. And then I got really ill. And, I wanted to understand what the root cause of my illness was. I'd always been, well, I think when I was like 16, I really started exploring different ways of eating and different ways of living my life outside of the way I was raised in my family, reading a lot of books and just feeling like that was the beginning of me going on a different path. And so I was aware of, eating to live and, conscious diet and all that kind of stuff. But at the time that I was diagnosed with uterine fibroids, I wasn't yet like a yoga practitioner or anything. So I feel like the fibroid journey, everything that came with that, opened up this new world where I just made it my job to figure out what modalities would help me feel better, and I wanted to really step outside of the Western medical industrial complex because I had seen how they respond to women with fibroids because it was already in my family. Uh, and so I knew I wanted to go a different route. And I just started, it's really what brought me to yoga in the first place was wanting to use that practice to learn more about my body and understand myself emotionally too. Like I just understood yoga as a self study. When I knew that's what it was, I was like, oh, I'm all in because I got to figure out what's up with this. And so,
right.
yeah, yoga, Reiki healing, acupuncture specifically has been a tremendous healing modality for me. And as I endeavored to heal myself, I just was learning so much and expanding so much, and really became a yoga teacher, and then started being surrounded by healers all the time. And Haji Healing Salon really started as a support group for women who have fibroids, because I understood a lot about that path. And so I wanted to share what I had learned and bring in some of the healers that I'm now in community with, in support of these women. So that was really successful. But when it was offered, the other folks in the community who also had like issues things that they wanted to heal, came and asked, "Can I join? Is it only for women? Do you have to have fibroids to benefit from this?" And so, it felt clear that spirit was inviting me to expand the space that I was holding. And it really kind of started as a pop-up. I got a grant essentially, and I was in a program that was like a small business incubator program. And that helped a lot. It gave me room to explore and, try some different things before investing, kind of betting the farm on the idea.
Right.
And so all of that was really helpful. But it's been a long journey. I'd say, you know, most of my life I've been working toward creating this space. And it feels really fulfilling to have had the opportunity to continually hold it for 10 years. So I'm sorry, I realized maybe that wasn't exactly, I feel like I answered the question in the end, but I might have gone deeper than you were ready to. So
No, no, there's no being ready. I mean, we knew in the prep that we could go a lot of different ways with this. So no, you hit upon several things that I want to go deeper into if you don't mind. So one of them, I want to go back to your background, right? Because it was a question that I did want to ask you. You were raised in a Buddhist household. So can you share from the knowledge that you have, how that grounding and other experiences that you had in Buddhism helped guide you to be open to underutilized practices such as natural healing? And I'll tell you when I say to the extent that you can, because you were raised in a Buddhist household, that's all you know. So it's not like you can necessarily say, well, when we were raised as Christians, and then when we became Jewish, and then when we became, so it's like to the extent that you believe that you know around, because I was raised in this Buddhist household, I was able to do what I was. And I also really like the comment that you made around your entire life has been preparing you for Haji Healing Salon.
yeah.
I love that and I honor that. And there are some areas of my life where I feel like the entire life was culminating. You're the sum total of your experiences. And so what we were doing was just getting ready for freedom at the mat or Essence Wellness House or whatever. But anyway, going back to your question, can you share more with us about that?
Absolutely. So being born a Black woman on the south side of Chicago, uh, and into a Buddhist family right away set me up as different. You know, my community saw me as different. We were the different family on the block, and also in school and everywhere I was just this alternative kind of Black girl. And I also made a lot of alternative choices, very different than my peers in terms of like the music I listened to and the way I dressed and, what I was attracted to. I'm an artist also. I was also, I've always pursued art and expressed myself artistically. And so all of that, set me up to be kind of this alternative person. And I used to think of myself a lot as this is a, it's a, I don't think I coined this term. Maybe you've heard it before, but like an alta negress, this old idea of like Negroes, negresses, and, like being like an alternative type. So,
Alti Negress.
right.
I've
Yeah.
never heard that term. You might have coined it. I've never heard that term.
Or alta negro if you were talking about a man. Cause, just Black people who are into different stuff, kind of countercultural. I feel like I've always been countercultural, and I was the positioning of being born in a Buddhist family that kind of was the start of it. But then as I grew and my art background exposed me to so many different kinds of people. Although I was living on the south side of Chicago, you know, um, the Buddhist organization I was a part of was extremely diverse. And then, I was taking art classes on the north side of Chicago. So I was meeting all different kinds of people that were influencing me. And I just became someone who was very, very comfortable. Again, the short answer, I'm comfortable in quote unquote alternative spaces. I prefer them. And, um, I think being born Buddhist, it taught me early how to communicate with people, what my beliefs are and, the
Mm.
significance of what we practice. And, because I always had to do it. If I had a friend come over, the first thing they would see was like our giant Buddhist altar in the middle of the living room. And so right away, I'd have some explaining to do. So I think it just feels very natural for me. I don't consider the spaces alternative. They always
Yep.
have felt just like where I belong. And I think that may be a result of having been here before. I do believe in reincarnation. And I think, this isn't my first go round. I don't even think it's my first go round as a spiritual person. I think I've been a devotee in many, many lifetimes in different faiths. And so, yeah, the Buddhist upbringing also it taught me discipline because every day, twice a day, my family and I prayed together, and that was just required. And in addition, I was expected to have my own personal practice of Buddhism and, understand how to use the practice and the principles, how to study. There was very rigorous study involved. And so, um, as I grew up and sort of became curious about other spiritual paths, I still kept that rigor. I always had that interest in spiritual study. And I held the space always for practice, even when my practices changed, even when I stopped, practicing the Buddhism that I grew up in, I found other things to fill that space with.
So you found value in practice.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's,
Yeah, that's powerful. It's like no matter what you believe, there is some value in discipline and practice that helps us out as human beings.
yeah, for me, it's just required. It's not
Yep.
optional, you know?
Beautiful. Now we
Yeah.
could all use that. All right. So when we talked after your amazing class, you allowed me to join because you were doing a series and you just allowed me to pop in. I felt out of place. And I was like, wait, they're on a journey and I just popped in. But thank you again for that. But you shared with me that you are a shaman, that you are a Reiki practitioner and an herbalist. Can you explain to our listeners and our viewers what those three things are?
So shamanism is the practice of earth medicine. There are shamans all over the world in, all the cultures. Essentially a medicine person, someone who is, I think of a shaman as someone who is astute at, um, using the earth elements to heal their community. And they're generally pretty devoted to community as well. A shaman has to have a community to practice in. And um, we also are skilled and we're comfortable in and skilled at holding liminal spaces. So these spaces in between, that maybe other folks aren't thinking about too much, but a shaman may be present at a birth, present at a death, so we kind of escort the souls into and out of this realm. And we
Mm.
also work to establish relationship with the spirit realm to be comfortable and to be welcome there. So the practices that we do are in support of that. And all shamans have different tools that they utilize. And for me, primarily, it's the tool of my voice. I use the practice of yoga nidra as well in my shamanic healing sessions, where I guide people into deep states of relaxation, and kind of offer them a journey, a shamanic journey that they can go on to kind of land at a space of deeper knowing, to commune with kind of like their inner soul self is what I like to call it. And also to be open and receptive to receiving messages from their own ancestors and guides. And sometimes those messages come directly to the person. Sometimes they come to me and I convey them. But I use a lot of plants in my practice, so plant medicine. So my voice and then the herbs. The herbs are always part of my practice. They're always there supporting. So there are other kinds of shaman who use different kinds of tools. Some of them use instruments, quite often. and have different kinds of practices that are primary. But those are the two things that fold into my practice of shamanism a lot. It overlaps a lot with my shamanic Reiki practice. I'm trained in that as well. And
But I don't wanna interrupt you, but I wanna ask you a question around being a shaman. So, we also discussed, you and I, that there are these terms that are new for many people of color, Black people in particular, and I'll include myself, and we have these negative connotations around a shaman, that it's something dark. Can you share with me and with us, how do you become a shaman? And, like, what is that practice of becoming, or what's the journey to become one? And why they shouldn't be looked at as negative and dark, from the dark side?
well, I think you have to really cultivate powers of discernment in this time because we are all sort of globally experiencing a spiritual awakening. It's very much required. It's very much being ushered in by the earth and by all supporting everything. It's just time. We can't go on the way we've been, and so a lot of us are waking up to our the knowing that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and there are a lot of people who are rising up as teachers, as healers, and many of them are really being called because light workers are needed more now than ever. And um, we, as people who are intending to engage these folks, need to sharpen our discernment so that we can feel what is aligned with us. I'm not, there are, um, so shamanism is not just inherently good necessarily. People can use what they learn however they feel called to use it, right? And so
Correct. Correct.
yeah,
Okay.
some folks who intend to use shamanism to harm are become very skillful at that and can do that. And so this is why I'm saying discernment matters so much. People need to be able to feel into what is for them and what isn't, and be able to see also whether someone is working for the light or not. I think that's something that generally we can feel pretty well, but there are some folks who are very skillful at deceiving too. So um, I understand people's apprehension around this. And I've encountered, so, okay, as I've been holding this space for 10 years with Haji Healing Salon and focusing on holding healing space for Black people, there has been, let's see, I've noticed that we are quite fearful of what we don't understand. And
Right.
I've made it a point to provide education for folks when they come into the apothecary. I really see it as a bridge because there are some people who are just starting to feel like, oh, I should have some kind of spiritual practice. What do I even believe in? Like they're very curious and they're seeking. And so when they come into Haji, they want to know, well, what's the reason to burn sage and what does this mean? What is this little cauldron? Are you a witch? And like they have so many questions. And what are all these things on the wall? They're the herbs, but they want to know, what do I do with these things? And so I just understand that this is a place for education, and I do my best um, to really be a welcoming voice and presence and just like to invite people onto a path and to see what aspect of it calls them. I mean, like I have so much, even things that I don't necessarily practice at Haji. Like I have books on hoodoo and voodoo, but that's not my practice. But I want people who are curious to come to Haji to find out. So
Right.
yeah, I'd be
Because
my
it's really about, I don't wanna interrupt you, but it's really around whatever speaks to you,
exactly. Yeah.
right? If you believe, I've been saying this forever, and it's kinda silly, bear with me. I've been saying this for years, that if you believe that you rubbing a rabbit's foot 4 times every morning for 3 weeks, if you believe that is why and how you got healed of whatever issue you had, then guess what? That's your truth. If you believe that it's, Jesus Cristo, if you believe that it's Allah, it's really the power of belief. And we have all these choices. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Yeah. I think more than belief, I would say it's faith. it needs to be faith more than more than belief. Faith has
Okay.
more power, I think. Belief
Then
has,
belief.
yeah, it has room for doubt. And I think that faith is more comprehensive. Like, you know, this is what I know is how faith feels to me. And so, you know, there's a good amount of faith required in healing. You have to know and believe that your body can do it. And you also need to just create the right conditions for the body to bring itself back into balance. Um, you know, Faith is developed in my experience through actual proof. You know, it's like you have a belief and then you practice that, you apply that. And then as you see a return, now it turns into faith. That's kind of how I see it.
Yep,
Um,
I got you.
yeah.
So I stopped you. You'd moved into being a shamanic Reiki practitioner and then herbalism. Tell us more about those two.
Yeah. So I first encountered shamanism when I was about 17 years old because I had a good friend in high school who brought me to his family home one day. It was a group of us, and I got to meet his dad. And his dad was like, at that point in my life, the most unique Black man I had ever met. He, in real life, he was quite a character. He was a very small man with these really piercing eyes and all these long locks and this long beard. And when I came into the apartment, first thing I noticed was like there was no furniture and there were just books and cushions everywhere, just books and cushions. And the whole place smelled like something I'd never smelled before. I thought I'd know later that it was Chinese herbs. And, there was like Native American flute music playing and just, it was like I'd stepped into a whole nother world, this little basement apartment in Wicker Park. And I was so drawn in to this figure, this man, and I just wanted to sit with him and know who he was and what he was all about. And I was kind of like, okay, y'all go ahead, do what, what y'all were going to do to my friends. And kind of sat down with his name is Jaleel. I sat down with Jaleel and just, started asking him, what are you doing? Who are you? Like, how do you live? And that kind of really developed into an apprenticeship. And I became his apprentice because I later find out he was a shaman. And he also had studied Chinese medicine. And he'd studied shamanism in the tradition of Carlos Castaneda, which I have many Carlos Castaneda books back here. And so he had been initiated as a shaman by one of Carlos Castaneda's students. So, I became his apprentice along with a couple other of his son's friends and some other folks, and we would have regular meetings to learn shamanic practices. And so I studied with him for 4 years. He was the first person that taught me about herbalism. So this kind of intersects with the question about, how I became an herbalist. I apprenticed with him with that. We started a little company called Urban Roots, which at the time was pretty novel, but now I see it everywhere. But HERBAN, Urban Roots. And he'd make the medicine. And my partner at the time was a graphic designer. So he made the labels. And then we go out and sell, this medicine at health fairs and to health food stores and stuff. So I'm like 17, 18, 19, 20. This is what I'm doing with myself on the side along with going to school. And yeah, so again, this alternative reality, because the kind of shamanic practices that I was having to do to develop myself as a shaman, they were not regular teenage kid things. The books I was reading, the things I was getting into was all, these were some of the seeds too for Haji Healing Salon. But that was the first time that I became aware of shamanism and really devoted myself to a study of it. And so I actually became, as I mentioned, I was his apprentice, but myself and my partner, who would later become my husband, we actually lived with him and both apprenticed with him for about 2.5 years. And then when we had my son, when I was pregnant and we moved out. And then I kind of went on this journey of forgetting, to be honest with you. I was really overwhelmed by motherhood and, I was a stay-at-home mom and was quite young. And I was the first one in my friend group to have children, to have a child. So, it was kind of a lonely journey. And I
Yep.
forgot a lot of what I had learned and I forgot to apply it. But Jaleel, the shaman, is also the first person who had ever introduced me to yoga. because when I was pregnant, he gifted me a prenatal yoga class package. Yeah. So it all, it just, it's been an interesting road. I'll just say that. And so after I had my son, I went back to school to get my degree and I was studying fashion design. And then I got into film and television and worked as a costume designer for many years. And then
Nice.
I developed a jewelry company because I realized I needed to have a lot more flexibility. My son was playing soccer. I had a lot of obligations to him and I needed to not be away as much as I was for film and television. So I started a line of women's accessories called Haji Couture. And that was really like the beginning of Haji as a thing because it was a nickname that I had been given by someone who actually is Muslim because the term is actually an Islamic term and it's given specifically to someone who has made the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Mhm,
So I'm
mhm.
doing a little appropriating. But it was a Muslim friend who noticed that I was always in prayer. And for him, his paradigm was, um, Islam. And so he said, "Oh, you're like a little Haji." And then he started calling me Haji. And so it was just a thing that stuck. And I decided to name my jewelry company that because I did, I did appreciate what was behind it. Like he was acknowledging my devotion, and I realized it didn't have to be so specific to what I practiced,
Right,
and so
right.
haute couture accessories was a thing for many years. And then um, when I decided to do a teacher training, a yoga teacher training, that was when I shifted away from the jewelry and more full time toward teaching yoga and started teaching under the brand of Haji Yoga. And then Haji Healing Salon became a thing.
Got it. And so I want to talk to you. Thank you for your journey. Your journey is one that you have just been obedient to openness and just going through one door and then being open to go to the next door. And I think that is, when you talked about faith, your life has been rooted in faith. Just kind of belief that if you ask me, I'm going to go through this door. And if I'm received in that door, fantastic. If I'm not, I can always turn back, but like continuing to move forward. So you're an herbalist and you talked about fibroids earlier and that this is really where the Haji Healing Salon began. Do you believe that everything can be healed through nature, peace, and faith? And when I ask that question, you know, I always am going to go back to a homeopathic natural remedy when I can. Pharma and drugs, or I think we're an over medicated society. I look at a lot of advertising, my background being in advertising and marketing. When I see advertisements for pharma in print, on television, on billboards, everywhere, I'm just like, they're just creating issues to sell drugs. If you ask me, that's my personal opinion. Um, and I question if more of the issues we have in life can be healed naturally through nutrition, through diet, through exercise. And there are many examples about people being, talking about, their diabetes being reversed or high blood pressure being reversed when they have better diets and exercise. But I want to ask you, as a herbalist and someone who, I want to go back to fibroids in particular, were you able to reverse your fibroids or shrink them or however you want to approach that through herbalism alone?
No,
No.
no.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Also, at the time that I had fibroids, I wasn't a practicing herbalist. I was a dabbler. I knew I didn't become an herbalist through working with Jalil. That was Chinese medicine that he was practiced in, and I was curious and interested in it. It didn't feel like a calling for me specifically. Used Chinese medicine quite a bit, and it was the primary healing modality that I used to manage the symptoms of my fibroids. So the acupuncture, which when the fibroids were at their worst, I had to receive acupuncture 3 times a week to just quell the symptoms and keep things under control. And also supporting with Chinese herbs. So those were prescribed by the acupuncturists who I was working with, the Chinese medicine doctors. And so the two together were really instrumental in helping me continue to live my life while I had the condition because I lived with it for about 7 or 8 years before I eventually did get the surgery. I had a myomectomy
Oh,
to
yeah.
remove the tumors. There were 9 of them. And, you know, the thing that I became and prior to having surgery, because I used to be Rastafarian, back in the day, one of the things that I liked the most about that spiritual path was the way that the emphasis on natural living, on eating to live, yeah, and living in such a way that medical intervention is not supposed to be necessary, right? But it's really kind of an idyllic way of looking at and dealing with life and the body. And, things don't always go that way. But when I was quite young and practicing Rastafari, I sort of promised myself that I would never allow myself to be cut on, that I would never have surgery. It was just like an internal promise. So when surgery looked like it was going to be inevitable for me, I had so much confidence because I had made this promise to myself. And I felt ashamed because I've been living a healing, what I consider to be a healing lifestyle and a natural lifestyle for so many years. And I didn't understand why it didn't prevent me from even getting this illness in the first place and why I hadn't been able to heal it. And so I had to work through all of that. All of that came up real big. And, that became part of my healing journey too, was like releasing the promise, forgiving myself, for whatever perceived failures there were around this, understanding that I had failed at nothing, that I needed to express gratitude for the fact that this healing technology was available to me and that everything I learned on the path to leading up to surgery was still beneficial to know and could probably help some other people who were in a different position than I was. I felt that the surgery would allow me to have a kind of clean slate where I could start again and, really apply everything that I learned to make sure that the fibroids did not return. That was the paradigm shift. It was like, okay, I'm still on this path. Like choosing surgery is not a failure of the lifestyle, and because I think some really specific conditions are required for healing. And I feel we live in a construct that makes it very difficult. It's
Can
just
you tell us what those are when you say, like, there's specific things that are required for healing? Are they universal, or can you share with
well,
us?
like what you were saying, like peace, stillness, time, time and space to be with yourself and to feel and access your own inner resource because
Yeah.
you already know what's required for your healing. But because we don't have time to listen deeply and we're already so engaged in the lives that we've created, the structure that we've made for ourselves, and it's like we're on this hamster wheel. And true
Uh-huh.
healing requires that you get off of it and that you allow yourself to be guided by something entirely different than this, than the and, I keep pointing out here because there's a window here, but like the
Right,
mix,
right.
you know what I mean? Like you kind of have to get off the wheel and you have to be guided by a whole different entity. And I think sometimes in order for that to happen, you have to leave. I hate to say that. And I know there's people who have done it without leaving and was still, being rooted in their lives. But for me, it just wasn't possible. I was working part time for an artist as a studio assistant. I was teaching yoga about 8 classes a week, and I was running a jewelry company. And I had a young son, and all these things overlapping and trying to take care of myself. So you can imagine, I've come a long way,
Right.
but very much am someone who was kind of healing the superwoman paradigm too, And so
Yeah.
it was all of these things. So the surgery also was um the whole thing taught me so much about healing. And even though I found myself in in the middle of the Western medical industrial complex, I brought my whole spiritual self to the entire experience, from creatively visualizing the right surgeon to call her in because I was going around having these consultations with different surgeons, and everybody was saying, well, you might as well get rid of the uterus because you don't need it. You said you don't want any more kids. You got one. Good, good thing for you. Let's just take it out so you don't have to worry about it. And my spirit, for me, that's fine for some folks. For me, it really was not what I wanted to do. And
Okay.
so, I knew that I had to advocate for myself and then I couldn't give up. This is where that faith piece dropped in, it's like, okay, there is a surgeon out there who knows who's gonna provide for me other options besides hysterectomy. And so, I would sit and be in prayer and meditation, meditation first, then prayer, and, ask, where is the person? I felt like it was a woman. So where is she? Like, I'm ready for her now, spirit, like, open the path. And sure enough, I met her. She, held me as I wept when she told me I didn't have to have hysterectomy. She gave me like two other options as well. We had, heart to heart connection, like right away. And when it was time to go in for surgery, I spent time, the day before my surgery was the first time I ever had a Reiki healing session. And when I tell you, it took away all the anxiety I was feeling. I was like petrified, going into surgery. The Reiki healing, it just lifted something off me and it gave me such surety that all would be well, because, going under, so many complicating factors, different things to worry about. And so on the day that I arrived for the surgery, like that day, the night before, the whole day before, I spent like cleared my schedule to spend the whole day preparing myself spiritually, just praying up, just visualizing everyone who would have anything to do with me and my body while I was in their care and blessing them, blessing their families, saying, thank you, God, for the knowing that everyone is having their greatest day on this day that they're doing this surgery on me. Like no one's in a bad mood. Everybody's having coffee. And yeah, I kind of like did have to play a little bit and be funny like that in it too, to kind of like
Okay.
myself up because I was aware I could die, in this surgery. And so I went in very joyful, very confident, and came out feeling the same. And then just focused everything that I had learned on healing myself in the 8 weeks after the surgery. I couldn't do physical asanas anymore. So for that 8 weeks, no yoga, but it's not no yoga, it was no asana, right? So I that's when I really developed a stronger meditation practice and, you know,
And I just want to pause there to say something for our listeners. What Aya Nikole is speaking to is that yoga, as I always preach over and over, the word yoga is the yoke, the union of the mind, body, and spirit. And there are several limbs to yoga, which we'll talk about that separately. But yoga asana is simply the movement. Asana is the movement portion. So you can be practicing yoga without actually doing movement, which is what you're speaking of right now. Meditation is yoga,
yeah.
right? So anyway, carry on. Don't want to interrupt. Just want to make sure that was a teaching moment. The teacher in me just wanted to make sure I heard that.
Ashé. And I just feel like there's a yoga to everything, honestly. It's whatever you're doing mindfully. You bring your whole self. There's a yoga to washing the dishes. There's a yoga to getting dressed in the morning. It just I feel like we really win when we're in a constant state of yoga, you know. But
Oh,
anyway,
I agree with you.
that was the
So,
yeah, so that was the first time that I really had to release my physical practice and rely and root down in meditation in a deeper way. I was really grateful for that moment too.
so as we round out this just beautiful conversation, I so appreciate you bringing your whole self, being fully present, and sharing so many different life experiences you've had, being so open and vulnerable. The question I have for you before I close by asking you about what offerings the Haji Healing Salon has, who it's for, and what the vision is for the future of Haji Healing Salon is for any woman listening right now, anywhere in the world, who has grown up with just believing what she's seen in her household, believing what she's seeing on TV, and believing very traditionally, right? And that traditional way might be you go to church and it's a Christian church and you pray and that's it. And you go to the doctor and that's pretty much healing. For anyone who has more of those traditional practices of healing, spiritual healing, but they're interested, I, Nicole. They're like, I heard about Buddhism. I heard about Reiki. I heard about a shaman. And they're a little nervous, fearful about dipping their toe in the water. What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah. So I at Haji Healing Salon, we have always focused on what I call community healing, which means we heal together. That's our motto. And it's this idea that we really don't do anything alone because spirit's always with us. Our spirit guides are always with us, our ancestors. But also, really, in this plane of existence, you can bring a friend, you can bring your mom. Like, you don't have to, come alone and be super vulnerable, locked in a room, just you and this healer. You know what I mean? It's like, I wanted to shine the light on these practices and invite us to do it communally because that's how we are as people. We are communal people. And we want to bring our folks. And so you can bring your folks at Haji and you can have a community healing, a community Reiki healing experience to dip your toe in the waters and see if it's for you. And what that will look like is coming into a small circle at Haji. There's just 6 people. So, it's not a huge thing. And, you're introduced to the modality. I explain what it is and what's going to happen in the session. Generally, there are oracle cards that I bring in, which I know some people also are apprehensive about cards, tarot cards, oracle cards. I am not a tarot practitioner. I've not been trained in it. So I tend to use oracle cards way more. But the oracle cards will be related to whatever our theme is that night. And there's people are always amazed by the messages that they get through these cards. There's one card at each place. The person chooses their place, and that card is always like, "What? How did spirit know?" Well, not how did spirit know. We know how spirit knows, but they're always shocked, and that kind of helps them open up to the energy a little more. And then they're guided into relaxation, and I go around and lay hands and kind of, provide the Reiki healing energy, which also doesn't require that I touch anyone. There are some people I always ask for consent before I, deliver any touch. And so people can opt to not be touched in the session as well. And they still benefit from the Reiki healing energy, which can be felt. It's very palpable in the room. And it's a way I'm not going in to change anything, to do any manipulating. There's nothing like that. It's just about receiving pure love, which is already here for us always in the universe. But it's helpful to have it directed. And so I think having it in a communal setting where, you are there with other folks, I think that has lowered a lot of barriers for people to try things like this. And I'd say also that, we just have to feel it out. It's like everything, like you said, when you walked in the Haji, you had a certain kind of feeling and it felt at home there. And so if you're exploring or you're curious or you're interested and you're walking into spaces where these things are offered, note how you feel when you walk in. What
Correct.
happens? Like
Great.
how's your breath moving in your body? Are there any sensations you can tune into? Like, let's just slow down and breathe and take notice. Is this a good place for me? Does my spirit rejoice when I'm in here? If
Gotcha.
not, if you feel opposite, if you feel contracted, if I went into a spiritual shop the other day here in Chicago, and as soon as I walked in, I could not stop coughing. My eyes were watering, everything was happening. I was like, okay, spirit, you want me to leave? Got it. And I just walked out. So I had every intention of shopping there, but for whatever reason, not that day. As soon as I got outside, fine. So, we have to pay attention. And as I said, be discerning. And that will go a long way. I think sometimes I hear a lot of horror stories from people who went to that tarot reader or had that crystal, the psychics, they have the neon in the window. People sometimes engage the psychic and then they have a bad experience and they're terrified of everything spiritual from then on. I'm like, come on. Like, I know you had red flags before you sat down there. So, we have to be willing to have that relationship with ourselves and to drop in more and trust our own intuition.
I was going to say the same thing, as I respond to that question myself, because I've been that person who's been seeking, who was raised as a Baptist Christian in Memphis, Tennessee, but I began yearning for more. Around 16, I explored Buddhism, voodoo, and I explored Buddhism as well as voodoo. And it was scary to step outside of what is native to you and the household you've been raised in. So, my encouragement for anybody who is listening to this particular episode and is saying, you know what? This Aya Nikole lady is giving me the courage and the emboldenment for me to go step outside of what I know to explore. My hope is that you will trust yourself, that you will take one toe, dip it in the water, one foot in front of the other, and explore and see what feels right for you. Well, Aya Nikole Cook of Haji Healing Salon, entrepreneur, artist, mother, phenomenal woman. We are really grateful for your time today. I want to give a shout out to your parents, right? For what they created with you, giving you the foundation, being bold enough on the south side of Chicago, really anywhere but the south side of Chicago, to be who they were naturally and for them to obey their spirits and to not, be swayed by what would be more popular and easier to do. And for you, much love to you for you continuing to follow your path and your way. And because of that, you are being such a light to so many people, such a beacon. And we wish you the very best of success with your practitioner program. And as you deepen your practices in herbalism and shamanism and Reiki as well. And I encourage everyone here to visit HajiHealingSalon.com. I invite you to go to Instagram to get more of the content around what she's doing. And if you're in Chicago, okay, everybody in Chicago, hands up, right? If you're in the Shy, please make sure you visit her salon that is right in the heart of Bronzeville. Beautiful, transformative, magical store right at the corner. It's Cottage Grove and 40, what is it?
45th, yeah.
45th and Cottage.
4448 South Cottage Grove Avenue. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love that it's on Cottage Grove. I was like, yes.
Well,
So many blessings to you. Ashe.